Okay, Shana Tova. Hope everybody had a beautiful Rosh Hashanah. And we're going to start with today's Torah reading, which is Parshas Vayelekh. And it's towards the end of the Parsha, but it's the first Parsha that we're going to read this year, in the new year. And I want to focus on the last Mitzvah in the Torah. This is the Mitzvah 613. Mitzvah 613. So let's look at the 5 psukim leading up to the mitzvah, and then we'll focus on the mitzvah. Vayomer Hashem al Moshe. God says to Moshe, Hein karvu yamecho amut. Pretty soon you're about to die. Karas Yoshuas, call Joshua, v'hisyatfu ba'ol moed, and stand him firm in the ol moed. V'atzavenu. Vayelekh Moshe v'Yoshua v'hisyatfu ba'ol moed. And Moshe and Joshua went, and they stood in the Ol Moed. Vayirah Hashem Ol Moed ba'amud anan. And Moshe and God appeared in the tent, ba'amud anan, in the pillar of a cloud. And the pillar of the cloud stood at the entrance to the tent. Vayomer Hashem al Moshe, and God says to Moshe, behold, you are about to lie with your fathers, you're going to die. And these people will rise. This is Moshe is about to die. God doesn't sugarcoat it. God tells him that you're about to die. You're basically, your children are going to sin. They're going to follow after the false gods. The children of Israel will abandon me and reject the covenant that I made with him. They're going to reject it. And I will grow angry on that day. I will abandon them. And I will hide my face from them. And on that day, they will find many, many tremendous tragedies that will occur to them on that day. Hold on 1 second. I just want to check the Vayelekh on that verse. Okay. Okay, so and so on that day there'll be so many tragedies. The Vayelekh says in the word V'yistatir panai mehem. So the last letters of that word Istatir panai mehem vayolachol. The Vayelekh says, I'll conceal my face from them, and they will become prey. That the final letters of those words equals 95. The numerical value of 95 is same as the value of Haman. And so therefore that relates back to what the Gemara says in Chulin, Anochi Haster Astir. And it's a reference to Queen Esther. That the miracle is also, salvation is the miracle. That's what the Vayelekh states. Okay, but keep going. And now the verse states, and this is what God is telling Moshe, that at the end of his life, he's being told that his children are going to sin and God will conceal himself. The people say, oh, the reason why these terrible miracles, tragedies are happening is because there's no God in my midst. There's no God amongst us. And at that point, I will hide my face on that day. And I will hide my face on that day because of all the evil that the Jewish people did. Return to foreign gods. And how do we protect against this? Says the verse, and this is the 613th commandment. Now, what you need to do is kitfu lachem es hashir azos. You must write for yourselves this song. What is the song? The song is a reference to, according to the Gemara in Sanhedrin 21b, this is a reference to the commandment, the 613th commandment, which is to write a Torah scroll. V'lamdet b'nei Israel, and you shall teach this to the children of Israel. Sima b'fihem, you have to place this Torah scroll in their mouths, the words of the Torah. Amanti alei hashira zot la'ed b'nei Israel. So that this song will be a testimony about me to the children of Israel. This is the 613th commandment. The 613th commandment is the commandment, kitfu v'chem et hashira zot. You are obligated, you are commanded to write a Torah scroll. You're commanded to write a Torah scroll. So I want to talk about this mitzvah. It's very, very dear to me. Excuse me. This mitzvah is very, very dear to me. It's the excuse me. It's the 613th commandment. So it's extremely, extremely precious because it's the last one. But more than that, it's a commandment that I took upon myself to do around 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. I think 4 years ago on Shavuot, I said, I want to write a Torah scroll. It's a commandment. And so after accepting upon myself, the first year when I wrote it, I don't know if somebody's trying to speak, I'm muting them for a second. The first year when I wrote one, it was kosher, but it wasn't as beautiful as I can do. And now I'm writing my 5th Torah scroll. So I've written 4. Now I'm in the middle of my 5th. So every time I write it every day, hopefully I improve and I'm trying to make it as beautiful a Torah scroll as possible. So I want to talk a little bit about this mitzvah and the importance of the mitzvah. And a lot of people, this is a mitzvah that unfortunately has fallen out of style. And a lot of people have said, okay, either it's too hard for us to do it all, or they say, oh, we'll just buy one. But the reality is, it's not too hard, because if it was too hard, Hashem wouldn't have commanded us. And if people start when they're young and dedicate a little time every single day, you'll be able to fulfill the mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah. And before I wrote a Torah scroll, I never did any calligraphy or never did any Hebrew lettering, and I don't have especially neat handwriting. But it's the mitzvah from the Torah that everybody can do. So let's read the Sefer HaChinuch. The Sefer HaChinuch talks about this important mitzvah. Says the Sefer HaChinuch, what's the 613th mitzvah? Mitzvah l'chtov kol echad miYisrael Sefer Torah. It's a mitzvah now really, according to almost every commentary, the mitzvah is on a man to write a Torah scroll. And as opposed to, when we'll see what the Sefer HaChinuch says about that. So the Sefer HaChinuch says, "Shenitztavinu liot l'kol ish miYisrael Sefer Torah," that we're commanded, every man in Israel, to have a Sefer Torah. So really, the commandment is for everyone to have their own Torah scroll. Im ksavo biyado harei ze meshubach v'ne'av ma'od. If a person writes the Torah scroll themselves, this is very praiseworthy and beloved by God, as it states, our rabbis state, ksavo komar biyado, that it says in the Talmud in Menachos that if one buys a Sefer Torah, that's beautiful, but if one writes it themselves, then ki'ilu kiblu mehar Sinai. It's as though you received it straight from Sinai. If you write Torah scroll yourself, it's as though you received it straight from Sinai. If somebody, it's impossible for them to write it by themselves, you should hire somebody to write the Torah scroll on their behalf. If somebody can't write it for whatever reason, then you should hire somebody to write it on your behalf. And it states, about this is what our verse means. Now, write for yourselves this song, and teach it to the children of Israel. Torah, write for yourselves this Torah that is this song. What are the roots of this mitzvah? Because it is known. By the way, it says elsewhere in the Gemara that in order to be a Torah scholar, you need to know how to be do three things. One is shlita, slaughtering. One is mila, circumcision, and one is writing. So it's interesting that none of these things are on the standard curriculum of anybody of any rabbinical school that I know of, or any yeshiva. It's not the curriculum anymore. Curriculum is Talmud study, which is obviously something very near and dear to me. But these three basic things, which the Chazal said that you need in order to become a Torah scholar, have fallen out of favor because we've become a religion of the mind more so than the religion of the doing. So what is the source of this mitzvah? That it's known that Bnei Adam she'em osim kol devivreim l'fi ha'achana hanimtzeit lahem, that we know that people, they do all their things according to preparation. And you can only do something if you've prepared for it. And so therefore, every single household is supposed to have a Torah scroll ready for them in the house. That you're able to read at all times. Hold on 1 second, stay with me. You know, people say, okay, why do I need a Torah scroll? Why do I need a Torah scroll? I just go to the synagogue. Well, you know what everybody realized during COVID? All of a sudden, everybody needs a Torah scroll in their house because they didn't have one. You know, the price of Torahs in COVID just like doubled. Everybody's like, we need a Torah scroll. And then it was too late. Everybody needs a Torah scroll in their house. And you need a Torah scroll in your house so that you don't need to go to your friend's house to get a Torah scroll. This is a commandment from the Torah. It's a commandment that everybody needs one Torah scroll. So that you'll know to study it and to fear God. So you become wise through God's commandments. And you'll know to come to understand the commandments, which are more precious and beloved than gold and all these glittering jewels. So the last commandment of the Torah, which is also the first parsha that we read of the year this year, is that everybody needs to have a Torah scroll in our home. It's not enough to have one that you have access to it. You need one in your home. And every single one amongst the children of Israel must strive for this. And this is what he writes. It's not enough to say, well, I got one from my parents. Even though your parents left you one, that's not sufficient. Here's a second reason. The reason is not just that we should have one that we have access to, but the second reason is we all need to have our own. Why? Two reasons. One, he's already given a reason. Two additional reasons. One, we want to make more Torah scrolls in the world. We believe that this is what Sefer HaChinuch is writing. The more Torah scrolls in the world, it will be a greater thing. And also, we want to be able to have more Torah scrolls so we can lend them to people who are not able to purchase them. Gemara in Maseches Ksubos says that one gives tremendous rewards to somebody who owns a Torah scroll and lends it out to others. And also, is also a special thing that people should have a new Torah scroll. It's also a special power, spiritual power, to have a new Torah scroll, each one amongst the Jewish people. We don't want people to become disgusted or turned off by reading from the old Torah scrolls. We have new of everything in life. The new is better. The new is better. We have new. You don't wear the same socks that you had 50 years ago. Why should you want the Torah scroll from 50 years ago? You want to get something new. It's better. It's more beautiful. The dabini, So now we add something else. Some of you might be saying, okay, it's too much. It's Torah scroll. I can't afford it, even though it's a mitzvah. We're only required to spend up to 20% of our money to perform a positive commandment. People might say, I can't afford this mitzvah. So he says, okay, no. The main mitzvah is to have a Sefer Torah. That's the main mitzvah. Don't let anybody else tell you any differently. And it's the main mitzvah. Nevertheless, he says, Ein safek shegam misvar shvarim shenitchabru al perusha Torah. Okay, he says there's no doubt. There's no doubt that, by the way, anytime it says no doubt, you could be sure that there's a doubt. That's what my teacher Chaim Soloveitchik told me, Rabbi Dr. Chaim Soloveitchik, because if there really was no doubt, then they wouldn't write no doubt. So it means that there's no real source for this idea. There's no real source. I mean, he's the source, or the Rosh is the source, but there's no source in the Talmud for this statement that he makes. And also by other books that are written as commentaries on the Torah, everybody should do there as much as they're able. Because all these reasons that we said before, that'll help you understand, and you'll have access, you'll study it. Fine. So those reasons are accurate. Even though you were given many books by your ancestors, you still have to buy new books and write new books. That's the way all pious people acted. They used to make in their homes libraries for scribes. They used to make a place for scribes to write, and anybody would build a Beit Midrash in their home. So this is the fundamental law: is to write a Torah. But Sefer HaChinuch says, okay, it's a good thing to write other works, but the main mitzvah is to write a Torah scroll. And then he says, what are some of the laws of these mitzvahs? So the more we understand the laws, the more likely it is that we'll fulfill the mitzvah. Midini mitzvah, keitzad kotfin sefer Torah. How do you write a Torah scroll? Ksiva mitukenet v'na. You have to strive to write it with beautiful handwriting, a beautiful, attractive script. V'yaniach ben kol teva v'teva kemlo ot ketana. Between each word, you have to make the space of one letter. Between each letter, he skips between each letter. Between the space of each letter is a thread of a hair. He doesn't say that here. And between each word is the space of a letter. Now that's not really exact, because there are some letters that are more than twice as big as another letter. Like if you compare a vav or a yud to a shin is more than twice as big as a vav or a yud, or widthwise. But so kamalo ot ketana, like you have to leave between each word the space of a small letter, like a yud. Ubein kol shita v'shita, and between each line you have to leave the space of another line. Kimo shita. When I write the Torah, I'm an inexperienced person writing it, so I have what's called double sirtut. The Torah has to have lines on it. Each page, each column is 42 lines. But when they make the parchment paper for me, the parchment, they make a double line, so I know exactly how far down to go, and I leave this exact space, one line between the bottom of the line and the beginning of the next line. And the orach kol shita, and the length of each line is 30 otiyot, 30 letters. But like I said, this is also problematic because we don't know how big each letter is. So he writes, you have to write the longest word in the Torah 3 times, which is the mishpachoteim. To write it 3 times gives you 30 letters. But the way the Torah scroll I write is 42 yudin, which is equal to 30 letters, because the yud is the smallest letter. So some letters are twice as big as the yud. Vizel rochav kol daf. And this is the width of every page of the Torah. You shouldn't make the lines shorter than that because we don't want the page to look like a letter. And not longer. We don't want your eyes have to go looking for it. You want it to be right there in front of you. There are 245 pages in the Torah, or actually there's two common versions of the Torah today. One is 245 pages, one is 248 pages. So Sefer Chinuch doesn't state that practice. I guess there wasn't universal agreement back then about how many pages it was. Let's say you have a letter, let's say you have a word which has 5 letters. You're not allowed to write 2 on one page and 3 on the other. You can't write 2 inside the page and 3 outside the margin. The margins are supposed to be neat. So you have to write 3 inside the margin and 2 outside the margin. You can't write outside. You can't leave over in the in each line. If you left over 3 enough to write 3 letters, that's a big problem, and it's not kosher. That's what he says. But if you have less than 3 letters left, you leave that space open and you start on the next line. Let's say you're at the end of the line and there's a letter, there's a word with 10 letters. So what do? You only have 3, let's say, and you have more than 3 letters left over. You can't write it all on that line. What do? He says if you can write half on the column and half on the outside the margin, you do that. And otherwise, leave the space blank and begin on the next line. Now, as another way states, between each of the 5 books, so really it's only from Bereshit to Shemot, and Shemot to Vayikra, and Vayikra to Bamidbar, and Bamidbar to Devarim. So it's only 4 times that you do this. You leave a space between each of the books of 4 lines. So between each of the 5 books of Torah, you leave a space of 4 lines. And then from the beginning of the 5th line, that's where you start. And when you complete the Torah, you need to complete it in the middle of the final line of that page. So today, this is all easy for us. It's very easy today because today we just copy it from what's called the Tikkun. It's called Tikkun Mekupalim. We fold it over, and that's how we copy it line by line. But of course, mistakes happen. But this is the requirement. Let's say you have left, so you always finish a Torah on the bottom of the last line of that page, in the middle of the line. Now you have to be very careful, says the Sefer Chinuch, with what's called Otiot Hagdolot, Otiot Haktanot. You have to be very careful with what's called the large letters and the small letters. This is something, I don't know if Joyce Stern is on the call, but this is something Michael Stern, he always used to point out to me, that he always would point out this concept of the way the word was written. So you have to be careful that there's a tradition about certain letters being written large and certain letters being written small. But the problem is, if you don't have that tradition, you can't make a letter too big or too small, because that will not be good. How much space do you have? You can make it 1.5 times the regular size before you have a problem. So that's the answer. And so then he says there are some letters that have 1 crown on it, and there are some letters that have 7 crowns, and each crown looks like a zayin. So you make at the top of the page, at the top of certain letters, the letters are called, the way you remember, is Shatnei Skats, Shin Ayin, Tet Nun Zayin, Gimel Tzadi. You make at the top of each of the left side of that letter the crown, and the crown is 3 little zayins on the top of the word. And the Gemara tells us that Moshe was watching Rabbi Akiva studying Torah. And when he was watching him study Torah, Rabbi Akiva was expounding thousands upon thousands of halachot, mounds upon mounds of halachot from every single crown. And Moshe became sad, didn't understand it. And God said, and then they said in this shir that Rabbi Akiva was giving, they said, how do you know this? He said, it's a law from Moses at Sinai. Moses gained his strength back. But we don't have any of those teachings. We don't, in the whole Gemara, we have not a single one of those teachings from Rabbi Akiva where you expound the thousands of laws, the mounds upon mounds of halachot from the crown. So where did all those halachot go? So we don't know. It doesn't say where it went. So then the Sefer Chinuch continues. So he says all this is just the nicest way to do the mitzvah. But if you made a mistake, or with the crowns, or if they weren't exact, then we're going to say, or if you made the letters or the lines too close. Just today, I made a mistake a little bit. I left too much of the space between the end of the line and the whole column, so I erased every letter. and rewrote it. But really, you don't need to do that. It would have been kosher. But the mitzvah is, it says, this is my God, I have to glorify him. The mitzvah really is to write the nicest Sefer Torah that you could possibly write. Sefer Torah, you have to do everything the best possible way. So even though you technically be kosher, it's still not appropriate. But let's say, but what would be a problem if you are hidbik os ba'os? If the two letters are touching each other, that's a problem. That's called negia. If the two letters are touching each other, then it's going to be a problem. Or if you have an extra letter, or you're missing a letter, or the form of the letter is not there, or then it's going to be disqualified. So those things are disqualifying. If a letter is touching another letter, or if a letter is missing, or if you have an extra letter, or if the letter doesn't look like that letter. And you know how you check to see if that letter looks like the letter? What you have to do is, this is such a powerful halacha, that you're supposed to, if you don't go to the rabbi, if you want to know if that letter is kosher, you go to a child who just started to learn how to read. And you have to ask that child, what does that child read? And if that child sees that letter, then it's okay. And also another thing that you have to be very careful, because this will disqualify the Torah, is Roshina bepesuchos usetumos. That this is called a psuchos and a stumos. The psuchos is an open section of the Torah, and sumos is a closed section of the Torah. And if you made a change there, then that disqualifies it. So sometimes you see in the printed version a pei that signifies the psuchos, or you see a samach, a sumos, it's a closed section. So if you mix those up, or if you don't have those, that's enough to disqualify the Torah. So what's an open section? An open section is like when you used to press the enter button on your keyboard, and that would start a new line. And a sumos, a closed section, is where you leave blank spaces, like nine letters, and that's called a situmos. That you just leave a space on that line and do tab, like you press 3 tabs before you could start. And so okay. Now this mitzvah, according to Sefer Chinuch, applies nowadays as well, and only applies, according to Sefer Chinuch, to males. Because since it comes from the mitzvah of Torah study, and only the males are obligated. So that's what the Sefer Chinuch says. Okay. Does anybody have any? Hold on. Let me just say before we go to questions about this, I want to just add what the Torah Tamima says about this, because the Torah Tamima also says a lot of beautiful teachings about this mitzvah. What does the Torah Tamima say? He says, quotes the Gemara. He quotes the Gemara from Sanhedrin 21b. What does the Gemara say in Sanhedrin 21b? He says, even though your forefather, because the two primary places for the laws of Sefer Torah are in the tractate Menachos in the third parak, and also in Baba Basra in the first chapter on Daf Yodal. But the Sefer Chinuch quotes the Gemara Sanhedrin 21b, where the Gemara says, even though your father has left you a Torah scroll, you have to write your own. As it says, you kitfu lachem es hashira azos. Write for yourself a new song. One time I was with the Mohel came in, and he was going to give a bris. The Mohel came in to give a bris to somebody. And the person was wearing a talus, and it was a talus, very small, it was old. And he said, why are you wearing this? Why are you wearing this talus? Why don't you get yourself a new talus? Some of you might not like the story, but this is what he said. And he said, the person said, I like to wear this talus. It's my grandfather's talus. He said, very nice, it is your grandfather's talus. You should find other ways to honor him. You don't wear your grandfather's suit. Do you wear your grandfather's suit? Nobody wears their grandfather's suit. Maybe once some people do. He said, but you get something new that's beautiful. This is the service of God. You're supposed to get something new, beautiful. So you could keep your grandfather's talus there. You could keep it in, watch it, or you could keep it close to you. But to wear, you should get something new. That's what he said. So he says, this is the commandment. It's a mitzvah to write a new Torah scroll. So what does he say? What's the reason? He said, this is what the Torah Tamima writes. The Torah Tamima writes that what's the reason it has to be yours? That why isn't it, if it's your father's, why isn't it yours either? Your father left it to you as an inheritance. So why is it not called yours if it's from your father's? If your father gives you an esrog, you fulfilled the mitzvah. If your father gives you a lulav or a pair of tefillin, you fulfill the mitzvah. So why do we say by a Torah scroll, that's something that you don't really fulfill the mitzvah if you get it from your father? Why is it not good enough to get the mitzvah, just inherit the Torah scroll and say, oh, I fulfilled the mitzvah? Why do you have to write your own? He says that this is specifically the mitzvah. This is what the Torah Tamima writes. He says it's specifically a mitzvah to write a Torah scroll and not to purchase one, because the main mitzvah is to make more Torah scrolls in the world. Because as a result of this, the Torah's greatness will be enhanced. And Rabbi Ami wrote 400 Torah scrolls. Rabbi Ami wrote, that's what the Gemara Bava Basra Yudal says. He wrote 400. I was thinking about this. If you write a Torah scroll nonstop, he must have been really, really fast. I could say maybe, I can imagine him doing, let's say, 4 or 5 a year. So I don't know how he did 400, but he did 400 Torah scrolls. 400. Maybe he just fixed them. I don't know, but he wrote 400 Torah scrolls. And so that's the essence of the mitzvah. And he says, really, if you purchase it, you haven't accomplished the same thing. It depends who you purchase it. If you just purchase it used, you haven't done enough. He says you have to go out and buy something new. The whole concept here is purchasing a Torah scroll for the purpose of adding more Torah scrolls to the year, to the world, commissioning Torah scrolls, writing Torah scrolls. And the idea is that the Torah scroll is so holy that it enhances the holiness of our world by adding more of them. Let me just pause for a second in case anybody has any questions. Hold on, I'll pause for a moment. Does anybody have any questions so far?